Hey everyone, and welcome to today's Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled to guide you through this fascinating material. Today we're going to unpack literally the most consequential conflict in human history, World War II. Now, this is a massive, incredibly complex topic, right? But our goal with this Explainer is to take this huge historical event and explain it easily and in detail. We're going to look at exactly how the world fractured, how it fought, and ultimately how it was rebuilt from the ground up.
But before we get into the actual mechanics of the war, we really need to ground ourselves in the staggering scale of what happened here. Between 60 to 75 million people lost their lives. It's almost hard to wrap your head around, isn't it? This was without a doubt the deadliest conflict in human history, and millions died not just on the battlefields, but as a result of massacres, starvation, disease, and horrific genocides. It was a total global war that spared almost no corner of the earth.
Okay, let's dive into this. To make a massive 6-year global conflict manageable, we've broken it down into 5 key themes for our agenda today. We'll start with the origins of conflict, move into a war of two theaters, explore the technology that changed warfare, highlight women on the front lines, and finally, look at the global aftermath.
So, let's kick things off with part 1, the origins of conflict, or how the world fractured. How exactly did the entire globe get pulled into this total war? Well, World War II didn't just happen overnight. It was really the result of a steady, slow-burn escalation of regional aggression. Back in 1931, we see Japanese militarism leading to the invasion of Manchuria, which is then followed by the Second Sino-Japanese War in 1937. Meanwhile, over in Europe and Africa, Italian aggression sparks the invasion of Ethiopia in 1935. But the immediate tipping point, the spark that ignited a truly global war, happened in September 1939. On September 1st, Nazi Germany under Adolf Hitler invades Poland. And just 2 days later, on September 3rd, the United Kingdom and France declare war on Germany.
Now, there was a very specific political maneuver that actually allowed that invasion of Poland to happen, and it's called the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. This wasn't just some standard non-aggression treaty. It actually contained a secret protocol that established German and Soviet spheres of influence. Essentially, they were drawing invisible lines on a map to divide up Eastern Europe. This pact literally paved the way for the division of Poland, allowing the Soviet Union to invade Eastern Poland right after Germany invaded from the West. This secret handshake completely cleared the board for the opening moves of the war in Europe.
And that brings us right to Section 2, a war of two theaters, dividing the globe. Because once the world was at war, the conflict essentially split the globe into two distinct halves.
We're basically looking at two massive concurrent wars being fought by the Allies. Over in the European theater, the Allies, which was primarily the UK, the US, the Soviet Union, and France, went up against the fascist states of Nazi Germany and Italy. This theater stretched across the Western, Eastern, Scandinavian, and Mediterranean fronts, and tragically resulted in at least 39 million deaths all on its own. Now, at the exact same time, in the Pacific theater, the Allies were fighting Imperial Japan. This was a completely different geographical reality. It was defined heavily by intense naval battles and island-hopping campaigns, and it actually wrapped up after the European War had already ended. Within the vast occupied territories of that European theater, a horrific tragedy unfolded. Nazi Germany enacted the Holocaust, a systematic genocide that resulted in the murder of 6 million Jews. It remains one of the absolute darkest chapters in human history, carried out methodically across the territories that Germany had conquered.
Moving on to Section 3, we're shifting our focus to how the sheer desperation of war drove incredible leaps in human engineering. Welcome to technology that changed warfare, rapid innovation. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how the desperation of combat over those 6 years basically laid the entire groundwork for a modern civilian world. I mean, we saw the widespread deployment of radar and sonar, which completely changed how we navigate today. Networked computing, that was born right here out of the necessity to break codes, giving us the very first programmable computers like Colossus and EDIAC. We also saw the first cruise missiles and ballistic rockets. In fact, the V-2 ballistic rocket developed by Germany was literally the first step into the space age. Its lead developer, Wernher von Braun, later went to the US and helped build the Saturn V rocket. You know, the one that took humanity to the moon in 1969? Add in the dawn of jet aircraft, the life-saving mass production of penicillin, and of course the Manhattan Project unleashing the devastating power of atomic weapons, and you see how much changed so incredibly fast.
A total war of this scale required total mobilization of society. And that brings us to Section 4, women on the front lines, the home front, and beyond.
This conflict fundamentally shifted the sociological makeup of the entire world. Just taking the United States as an example, nearly 350,000 American women served in uniform. They stepped up and volunteered for branches like the WACs, WAVES, and WASPs. These women took on incredibly critical roles to free up men to fight. They were repairing airplanes, serving as radio operators, flying military aircraft across the country, and get this, they even trained anti-aircraft gunners by acting as actual flying targets. Meanwhile, back on the home front, quickie marriages became the norm before men shipped out. Women took over the massive defense plants, which gave us the iconic Rosie the Riveter. They managed the finances and even stepped into totally new public roles like streetcar conductorettes in cities like New Orleans.
But it's important to remember this wasn't just safe factory work. These women were directly in harm's way. 68. That is the number of American servicewomen who were captured as prisoners of war in the Philippines. On top of that, 16 Army nurses were killed by direct enemy fire. More than 1,600 nurses were decorated for bravery under fire. They were right there in the thick of the action, even landing in Normandy just days after D-Day.
To really summarize their massive impact, General Dwight D. Eisenhower honestly said it best. The contribution of the women of America, whether on the farm or in the factory or in uniform, to D-Day was a sine qua non of the invasion effort. Now, sine qua non is a Latin phrase that translates to without which not. It basically means an absolutely essential condition. General Eisenhower knew for a fact that the Allies simply could not have won the war without the incredible aid of women.
So, that brings us to our final chronological bookend, Section 5, the global aftermath, the world rebuilt. When the dust finally settled and the guns fell silent in September 1945, what exactly did the world look like? Well, the end of World War II completely transformed global political and economic structures forever. The victorious Allies occupied Germany, Austria, Japan, and Korea with the goal of restoring governments and funding economic recovery. And to prevent a conflict like this from ever tearing the globe apart again, the United Nations was created, with the major victorious powers forming its Permanent Security Council. But, as you might guess, that alliance fractured pretty quickly. The United States and the Soviet Union emerged as rival superpowers, instantly setting the stage for a tense, decades-long ideological standoff we all know as the Cold War. Plus, the absolute devastation of Europe meant its great empires were rapidly waning in influence, which triggered a massive wave of decolonization across Africa and Asia. The old world was essentially gone, and a completely new one was being forged.
We've seen how geopolitical borders, the United Nations, and even modern tech and social dynamics were all drastically accelerated or just outright created between 1939 and 1945. So with the institutions and technologies born from WWI still governing us today, are we still living in its shadow? It is pretty fascinating to realize that the world you woke up in this morning was built directly on the outcome of the events we just walked through. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. I really hope this deep dive helped explain an incredibly complex topic easily and in detail. Keep asking questions, keep learning, and I'll catch you next time.